And I think also in terms of this particular question about the young dreamers being, assimilated, and there's more of an openness to them, is I think there's kind of this innocence and the guilt of their parents kind of is built into that. And absolutely. And Rinku, I want to pitch this next question to you as well. And the question is, can you talk a little bit about how race impacts this conversation? My great-grandparents migrated to America from Italy and Ireland, and I'm not sure this is the image of immigration we get today.
Mm-hmm. Well, race is definitely a significant element of the system, why the system looks the way it does. And it's definitely a factor in the current discourse and the dialogue. There are advocates and communications people who will say that race is not to talk about race from our side. But if we don't talk about it, then only the other side is going to talk about it. And they will talk about it in code, but they will talk about it nonetheless. They'll be triggering all those frames that they want to trigger that says America is a white country. Now, I think race has always been a factor in immigration policy, though historically, when it was the Irish and the Germans, they were not considered white. Like, white didn't actually exist as the same kind of category then that it does now. And there were lots of distinctions between Anglo-Saxons and other kinds of Europeans. So Italians, I mean, people may know of a great book called When the Irish Became White. The Ignatieff book, which really goes through, it's a history of Irish immigration. And if you read the newspapers from, through the 19th century, very explicitly, the Irish were equated with black people. They were lumped right together. They certainly lived in a lot of the same kinds of spaces, and that was part of the narrative of why the Irish are bad for America. So it's always been a race discussion. It's just who got defined as part of what race has shifted over the course of history. And then, of course, the other big shift is that now the immigrants of today look really, really different from Anglo-Saxons. Like if you were an Italian, some Italians could pass as close to Brits, I guess. And eventually there was a lot of intermarriage, between the ethnicities and so on. But we really stand out, immigrants like me and Cristina and Jose. We stand out, and our kids are going to stand out. Well, actually, our kids are not going to stand out because everybody is going to look like them too. But I think that's why we're having this particular. Race and immigration does go cyclically. Anxiety about certain racial groups immigrating goes up and down over decades. And I think the reason we're in the current wave that we're in is that post-1965 immigration is a generation old now, moving into 2 generations. So its effect is becoming apparent. We think it's mostly positive effect, but there are people who feel really threatened by it. So I'm in favor of explicit discussion of that, kind discussion, but explicit. And I think if you're going to engage in that discussion, though, it has to be because you're committed to changing the way Americans think about immigration in a long-term way, not just for the next election and not just for the next session of Congress. The whole system needs to be reworked for the kind of global economy we're in now. You can't even make immigration policy in a vacuum that doesn't include every other kind of system, education, employment, etc. So race is a big factor, and most people are uncomfortable with it, but we have discovered ways at the Applied Research Center to engage people in a discussion that centers more on the impact of our actions and our collective decisions than on the intention that people have. We assume good intention unless people really prove that they've got something else, and then we focus on impact, and we do find that sometimes opens up some space because people don't have as intense a fear of having to defend themselves against the racist label.
Absolutely. Alex?
I think Iyaba wanted to.
Yeah, I just wanted
Yeah,
to,
please.
Thank you guys a lot for coming. On the question of race and immigration, actually, from the other angle, why do you guys think there's not black people being represented anymore? I'm from the West Indies, and I think there was a Nigerian in the story.
Yeah, I really wanted to make sure that there was somebody.
I know so many more people that
Yes.
look like me than look like you guys that are illegal immigrants.
Right.
I was wondering if you guys are doing anything to reach out to those kind of groups. And the second thing is, what are you guys doing to educate the average American on the fact that their country goes around the world bragging about being the best country in the world, which brings people here?
Right, right. If we were just a little less self-congratulatory, we might have some space.
I think on that, like if we look at even just our network, the United We Dream network, most of our groups are of immigrant youth who are mainly from Latin American countries. And that's not to say that there are groups of undocumented youth or even just undocumented immigrants from the Philippines, from Korea, from Nigeria, and other African countries. And I think that for us, the young people that have gotten involved naturally and organically have been from Latin American countries, but we are doing intentional efforts to reach out to Korean groups, particularly in California, for example, the Bay Area and other places, because I think that for us, it's key that immigration does not get labeled as the Latino issue. I mean, it's already labeled in that way, and it's sort of the current that we're trying to challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add, for example, out of the about 11.5 million undocumented people, a full 1 million are actually Asian and Pacific Islander.
Mm-hmm.
A full million of it. Filipinos, Koreans, like in Tagalog, we actually call undocumented person tago ng tago, which means hiding and hiding, which tells you what we think about the issue, right? Like when I first came out, like people were like, "What are you doing? Like you're coming out about being bakla, being gay, and being TNT. What's the matter with you? You know, like that's a lot, you know." But interestingly enough, like talking about the African immigrants, I remember doing an event at Yale, and it was mostly white, 3 or 4 Asian people, and there was this like black family in the corner. I remember like, and by the way, in college I majored in African American studies because of James Baldwin is what happened. I met James Baldwin and I majored in black studies. And I remember just being fixed at them. I'm like, what are they doing here? Like and of course after the event happened, I just went up there and introduced myself, and they came and goes, "Oh, we follow you on Facebook." And the whole family was undocumented from Ghana. But the support system, when they think immigration, they think it's only Latinos, right? And so they don't know where they fit in this or where they can go. And to me, which is why building these spaces and making sure that people feel welcome. The other thing is I've done enough events where somebody who's white would come up and say, "I feel so guilty, man. Like, I'm undocumented. I'm from Britain. I'm from England. Whenever people think about this, they never think about us, That's why it was really important for me, the Time magazine cover, to have white people. We had somebody from Germany, Manny. We found an Orthodox Jew from Israel, been here since he was 3. His name is Roy Naim. He's really incredible. And now, because of Roy coming out, and he came out to me on Facebook like last year. I was like, oh my God, an Orthodox Jew, undocumented person, please, where are you? Let's talk. Right? And then now, Roy tells me that more people have come out to him who are Jewish, undocumented people via Facebook and Twitter. So again, it's like creating these spaces and making people feel like, to me, we're not even fighting, by the way, about immigrant rights. We're fighting about American rights. You know, when I've like gone out and speak, like one of the things I kind of just do to like, you know, kind of shock some people, particularly when I was in Alabama, was that, you know, there was a time when we have 12 million undocumented white people crossed this border called the Atlantic Ocean and landed on Ellis Island. So what makes it different? Is it because we're crossing a physical border, never mind that, you know, Mexico actually used to own parts of the United States? Why am I here? My mother didn't, I haven't seen my mom 19 years next month. My mom didn't send me here because she didn't want to see me for the next 19 years. She sent me here because she said when I was 12 she wanted to give me a better life. Well, of course, as I got older, wait up, why wasn't that better life available in Manila, in the Philippines? Who owns the Philippines? What's the history, foreign policy and economic policy of the Philippines? Why are people here? We haven't even gotten to the real nut graph in journalism, as we like to call it, or the conversation, because we're still stuck in the whole, they're all Mexicans and from the border. We're still stuck in the first sentence, man. And we have to get to this nut graph. People are here because I don't want to get all Howard Zinn on people.
I want
You know?
you to.
Hey,
Howard
I'm
Zinn.
all about Howard Zinn. I don't want to get all Howard Zinn on people, but U.S. foreign policy and economic policies have a lot to do with why people are moving, which is why migration is going to be one of the key issues of the 21st globalized century. People will move where there's food.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah.
Really quickly, there's a great organization that runs out of Oakland called the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, BAJI. I would connect with them, African Americans and African immigrants. And I also think that outside of the Latino community, this becomes complicated because there's a big class range in Asian immigration and African immigration as well. African immigrants are actually, 10 years ago, their per capita kind of income and wealth was the highest among all of the immigrant groups. So there's a set of Africans coming who are not undocumented and who are rich, you know, so their situations are somewhat different and they control a good amount of what gets done around around African immigration. And yeah, I think if you're gonna build an alliance that isn't reliant just on the numbers that you have, like you don't just say, okay, we're the majority, and you know, if we're the majority of the people who have the problem, which is Latinos, then you know, we can run this sort of struggle by ourselves. I don't think people think that consciously, but it's embedded in there, and it generates their behavior. So if you want to do something multiracially, you have to really do that very consciously, and you have to actually start doing it before you even build a political agenda, or, you know, not start. All kinds of sequencing are okay, but the earlier you think about, let's hold off on the plan until we have everybody in place, the more successful you'll be in building a multiracial alliance.
Great, thank you. Karen, did you want to sign up?
I think some of the dynamics at play in terms of who is visible in the movement sort of thing, some of it is strictly numbers, some of it is how established have folks been here, what's the infrastructure, organizational infrastructure, and then there's different ways then you engage. Like our organization has 200 member groups around the state. There are definitely some community, and we're multi-ethnic, so we have you know, various Latino organizations, we have African, we have Caribbean, we have South Asian, various South Asian, you know, the whole globe basically. But there's also some communities that are less established, have less of their own sort of nonprofit infrastructure. And then, you know, the best way to reach some of them may be through churches or temples or mosques or, you know, and they may be less engaged civically as well. So it's a constant process of also building capacity across communities to build that ability to sort of come out and be part of a bigger movement. So
Absolutely, thank you, Karen. Yes, Alan.
I just wanted to ask a question from a slightly different perspective. How much of the problem is actually being undocumented, and how much of the problem consists of being perceived as the other?
So I just want to repeat that and make sure that we're clear. How much of the problem is about being undocumented, and how much of the problem is actually the perception?
Perception of being the other.
Of being the other. Okay.
No, please, Karen.
I think that's, I think the factor of the other is sort of in many ways the key, I think a key behind a lot of the debate that happens here. And I think it has a lot to do, again, you know, there are going to be tensions that arise as demographics change. And then it's really how do you end up handling that that affects where things come out. And I think one thing I found within our own movement is like, what are the stories that we put out there? And I think very often what we have ended up doing, and you know, it's understandable, you raise up the story of that sort of model immigrant, you know, the one who arrived here not speaking English and within a year was the valedictorian of his class, or, you know, the rocket scientist, or the, you know, whatever it might be. Or the sort of other extreme, which is the poor, sad creature who's living 12 to a room, working 24 hours a day, living this really marginal existence. And there isn't enough, but I think there is more of it now, in part because of the DREAM movement, of the sense of we're not necessarily at either extreme, we're regular people. And there was a really moving moment, you were part of this, when we had you and Walter come in. About 4 or 5 years ago, Cristina and a colleague of hers came in and just talked to our staff to sort of personalize for us, because we've all been working in this field, just to say, what is it like growing up undocumented? What is it like? And the stories you guys told were like things that can resonate with anyone. I remember Walter saying, like, what it's like dating someone, at what point, like first, second, third date, do you let them know the reality? You know, and I think, and it was stories about, like, you know, living in your suburban home or doing, you know, whatever the thing was, it was very identifiable. It wasn't the other. And I think that there's been more of that with the DREAM people coming out and telling their very sort of ordinary stories. And I think that that makes it more sort of, people can have more empathy because it's not the other.
Absolutely. Jose.
Well, but I think, like, to kind of partly answer that question, I mean, look at the Arizona bill, right? You're going to stop somebody because somebody whom they think to be is illegal, right? And which is why it's an attack to the entire community, because how do you know who is and who's not?
Right.
How do you know, right? Is it you're pulling over, I mean, are you pulling over somebody just because they happen to be brown or they happen to look like the other? And then what's gonna happen? I mean, you guys have, we talk about the cyclical nature of this, but I think what's gonna be different this time around is you have a country that's already becoming minority majority. The other is becoming us. That's gonna be the big difference. And I think that's where it's like, if we don't figure this out, right? I mean, I can easily see, and again, like, I'm doing a documentary right now on immigration, but my next documentary is gonna be on whiteness. I'm just fascinated by this idea of, I went to an event at the University of Georgia in Athens, and the president of the college Republicans came, and we had this interesting public back and forth, and he questioned my whole Ellis Island thing. And then I go, well, you know, where are you from? What do you mean? I'm American. I know, where are you from? I'm white. White is not a country. Where are you from? And then he looked at me and he was like, I don't know. Well, can you like figure out and then let's talk? And again, you know, it's so easy for us in this community, again, to talk about like white privilege, because maybe we know what that is, but for most people, that's like, all they know is that this like, you know, all these black people are taking their jobs and all these Asian people have like Jeremy Linned out their colleges. You know, it's like they don't know that. They just know that change has happened and they got left. They got left behind. And that's why I think it's important to be able to unpack these kind of conversations. Or else, what you're talking about, you know, Alan, the fact that we are becoming, from a demographic standpoint, you know, everybody. What's going to happen is if we don't confront this and really face it, we're going to have a generation of predominantly conservative white people who feel somewhat left out, and who knows how that's going to manifest itself. And that's why it's even more important, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable. How do we get white people talking to other white people about what white privilege is? That's the key one. It's like me trying to talk to black people about the N-word. I'm never going to do that. Like, you know, like we have so many white allies, progressive allies, liberal allies who like want to team up with us. That's great. But when are you going to go talk to the people who look like you? When is that going to happen? So, I mean, again, these are the kind of questions that which is why the whiteness documentary I've been so fascinated by, just thinking about how we even, when that happened and when that shift happened. And now that I had this one African-American judge in Alabama who said to me, the first African-American appointed to the federal bench in Alabama, who said that Barack Obama being elected president is the ghost that haunts all these generation of Southern legislatures. He's the ghost that haunts their dreams. They can't believe that he's up there. They can't believe it. And so now every move they make, may it be the Georgia bill, the Alabama bill, it is precisely in response to that. And again, if we don't figure out how to talk about that, I mean, we're gonna be in like, you know, we don't have a Howard Zinn anymore, so I don't know how this is gonna work out. But, you know, like, so that's what I'm personally, from a storytelling standpoint, I'm most fascinated by.
Alan, thank you so much for that question. I think we're going to wrap it there, and there's so much to be said on this topic, and I really can't thank the panelists enough. It's been absolutely terrific. I want to thank Karen, I want to thank Rinku, Cristina, and Jose, and I want to leave you with this Howard Zinn thought: no human being is illegal. Thank you.